Hey y'all, and welcome back to Keeping Up with Christy. On today's video, I'm going to be sharing 2 recipes that I made for dinner for our family, but I went ahead and took the opportunity to make double of both recipes. I actually packaged these things up and took them with me to the beach. If you missed our vacation vlog, we went to Ocean Lakes, and I'll link that down below in the description. You can go watch that as well. But the first thing I made was creamy Tuscan chicken pasta. It was so yummy. These are the ingredients that I have laid out, and you'll see them as I go through, putting them all in the pan. And I have my pot to make everything in and a couple of bags. That's where the leftovers that we don't eat for that night are going to go. The first thing I do is start with just cooking up my chicken that I have cut up into small bite-sized pieces and putting that into the pot, seasoning it with salt and pepper. And you need to do this in batches. I was making a lot, obviously, because we were having it for dinner, as well as a make-ahead meal that I was making. And putting all that chicken at one time, you won't get any kind of browning happening, so you want to do it in batches. Then once you have all of your chicken browned up, you put some butter in the pan, and then you start with some more seasonings. That is garlic. I get the already pre-chopped garlic, so it makes life a little easier. And then you can do this with like roasted red peppers. They're little, no, I'm sorry, not roasted red peppers, sun-dried tomatoes, but they're a little chewy to me. And so we had a lot of fresh garden tomatoes. My dad planted some tomato plants this year, and we had some that were just still coming off of that, even toward the end. So I used up some of those that needed to be used up, and I thought it worked well. Of course, you told me put in the whole bag of spinach, and you know how spinach is. You start off with that big pile, and then it just cooks down. That's heavy cream I'm putting in next. And basically, you're just wanting to cook that, can let it come up to a boil so it will thicken, because you know cream will do that as it reduces. I just put in a tablespoon of Italian seasoning, and then a little more salt and pepper because I salted the chicken, but I've got to salt the sauce at that point. So you want to make sure you season at every step. And so then I just let that cook, stir everything together, get a bowl going until it will start to thicken. Now, once it's thickened, y'all have heard me say this before, I like to add my cheese off of the heat. So I remove the pot from the heat and I throw in my salt, or my Parmesan cheese. You saw me add a little bit more salt. What I do, and I didn't show it in the footage, I taste it. I grab me a spoon out of the drawer right there in front of me, and I just give it a little taste. And if it's gonna need more salt, that's when I'm gonna add it. So I just kind of taste along the way. I had boiled up some penne pasta. And so once that was drained, after it had gotten cooked, you just stir that into your sauce. So again, this is called creamy Tuscan chicken pasta recipe. I just looked at a lot of different recipes, and I didn't end up using one in particular because they all called for sun-dried tomatoes. I changed that up, and then I needed a big batch, so I just kind of winged it and made it on my own. But I can link kind of an inspiration recipe. Those crescent rolls that I served alongside, all I do is I take those out, open them up regular, spread them with butter, a little garlic powder, and shredded Parmesan cheese. Roll those bad boys up, and they're delicious to serve along an Italian meal. That was my leftovers, and I just bagged that up and froze it. We took that to the beach, and I heated it up at the beach to eat one night. It was good, even the second time around. So the next thing I make is a Mexican lasagna. My kids love it when I make this. It's basically like a big taco in the pan, and you just cut out in squares and eat it. So what I'm going to need, and again, I'm making 2. So I have about 2.5 pounds of ground beef there and 2 onions because I'm making a double batch. Our homemade taco seasoning that will go into that mixture to season it, as well as salt and pepper. And then I'll throw in my canned goods, which I was going to use 2 cans of diced tomatoes. I have one there that's like diced tomatoes with green chilies, and then another one that was like, I don't know, chili ready or something like that. It's 2 different kinds. It doesn't matter. Just 2 cans of diced tomatoes, whether they have seasonings extra added in or not. A couple cans of beans and a can of corn. You could do 2 cans of corn. I just didn't have it on hand. And then you're going to need some tortilla shells, like soft flour tortilla shells. And then, of course, some shredded cheese. Now, this is how I normally make my Mexican lasagna, but tonight, on that night, I decided to make my queso, which is basically butter, flour. I don't have those things out, and milk. And then you add your cheese. We use white American and some green chilies in the can. So I decided to add an extra layer to mine by doing that and adding in the queso. So you'll see me go back and forth from 2 pots. I have this one, then I'm going to start the ground beef and my chopped onions in, and I'll season that up. But then in my other pot, I'll be showing you how I make my queso. So moving over to the queso, I start with a 1/4 cup, which is half a stick of butter, and a 1/4 cup of flour. You just want to cook that. If you've watched my videos, you've heard me say it before. You just want to cook the flour out of it. So while I don't show it in real time here, you're waiting for it to get a little color and to start to smell. You want it not to smell like raw flour, but a little nutty. I then add in my green chilies and my 2 cups of milk, and that is just gonna sit there on the stove at like medium heat, and it will thicken up. You also want to remember to season it. I do salt and pepper. Sometimes I even add taco seasoning into it. It's just kind of what I feel like doing on that night when I'm making it. So that is going to be one of the layers into our Mexican lasagna. So here I just take a bowl and set a colander on top of it, and I drain my ground beef, and then I can throw all my chopped onions in there, and then I'm putting in some garlic, probably a couple of teaspoons, 2 or 3 worth in there, which is like the equivalent of 2 to 3 garlic cloves, and just get all that mixed up and going. And then you're going to start to add all your cans, and your ground beef goes back in there. I take a bowl and I cover it with aluminum foil. And then, y'all, you can just let that sit when it not dries, but when it cools. It just kind of congeals. And then you can just take your foil, wrap it up, throw it in your garbage can. Do not put that stuff down your sink. Most of you probably know that. My daughters did not. One night I had them make sloppy joes, and they drained that ground beef, just let that oil drip right down the sink. Then when it stowed up, I was like, what happened? Neil cleaned it out. He said, there's grease in here. I was like, Abby and Maddie made sloppy joes. So life lesson, and they had to learn it. So back at the beef, you saw me, I added in some taco seasoning. You could just use a couple of packs, or if you make your own homemade, add a few tablespoons into that, about 3 or 4 probably. The cheese sauce, once it's starting to thicken, that milk base, I just add in some cheese slices on that pot, because we're making like a half a batch of queso. It was like 7 cheese slices. So I'm adding that in. You just whisk it up and let it go. Back at my other pot, I'm throwing in all my cans. So my 2 cans of tomatoes, my 2 cans of beans, my 1 can of corn, and I make sure that I do rinse and drain the beans and the corn. So you just get all that mixed up, and basically, you know, it's it. It's done now at this point. It's going to go in the oven, so even heating those vegetables through, that's not necessary. You see me again seasoning it up. You do want to season at every step, and especially if you're using homemade taco seasoning, you don't have salt really going into that. And ground beef and canned vegetables, they can use extra salt. I don't know why it recorded this way, kind of that weird footage. Also, though, I forgot to start recording, so I'd already started making the lasagna, but you know how to do lasagna, right? So you start with just on the bottom, spray your pan. I got 1 glass and 1 aluminum, because one's for that night and one's for the freezer for later. You just spray the bottom with some spray, and then you do layers. Tortilla shells, your meat mixture, queso if you make it, and then shredded cheese. If you don't make the queso, if you leave that step out, it's just the other things. The tortillas, the meat mixture with the veggies, and shredded cheese, and do it again. So that's what I'm doing here. Now, my big one for that night, we had like 7 adults here to eat. It's like a 10 by 13, and it held 6 tortilla shells on each layer for that layer. And then the little one that I'm taking to the beach, that one just holds like 3, and I had to cut one of them in half. So just make sure you tear them, do whatever you need to do. If you end up buying the big burrito ones, like you might only need 2.5. So for a big one, or 2 for a smaller one. So you just do what you need to do to get tortilla shell in a layer. And that's like your lasagna noodle. And I said that in air quotes. And while I'm recording this, I literally made air quotes with my fingers as if y'all can see me. It's early morning and I'm trying to edit my video. Anyway, next I put on the queso cheese, and it's nice and thick. And this, like I said, we don't normally make this, but I was like, I have all the stuff and I want to try it. And what I liked about it, especially for the one that went into the freezer and then we ate at the beach, it was nice and moist. It had plenty of just creaminess to it. And you don't always have that when you're just adding the cheese, the shredded kind. So I really liked it with the queso, and it doesn't take any more time, because if you do the 2 pots on your stovetop, you got them both going. And it's just kind of, while I wait on this, I'm going to go do this. And you're just moving back and forth, and it's pretty simple. I cover it with foil to put it into our oven. I usually put it in at like a 350, 375 oven and just let it go for, 20 minutes till it's all heated through. And then the one for the freezer, I spray the underneath side of the pan lid, or if you were using foil, you would do the same thing. That's just so your cheese doesn't stick to your lid. And then I always make sure after it's sealed that I write on there what it is, because I can't see it. Got to put on there the name of it, and how long I need to cook it. So I made sure when we were at the beach, I just stuck it in the fridge and let it thaw, and then I was able to put it in the oven for the amount of time it said. This is what it looked like on the night it came out, and here at home. That night we ate it. It was so good. I cut that into 8 big squares, a 10 by 13 into 8. And my son, he usually goes back, and that night he did, and he went back and got a half of a square for seconds. So that's what it looks like served. We top it with sour cream, guacamole if you had it. So thank y'all so much for watching. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. See you next time.